The Parliamentary Labour Party can be a little bit PR shy sometimes, but there are a few members who have never wavered in their commitment. And in fact, I personally was always convinced about PR, but it was listening to our first speaker who really nailed it for me, because he explained to me how it might work. Now, I described him as James Bond last year, and I haven't thought of a better description this year, but I would like to welcome, with a massive thanks for his unwavering support, Stephen Kinnock MP.
Well, thank you very much, Laura. And when you've finished winning this campaign, I think there's a job for you as one of those warm-up acts in the BBC studios. You know, before Have I Got News for You or whatever, they get somebody in to say weird stuff about who's here from Lancashire and things like that. And I thought you did that absolutely brilliantly. It's been a real pleasure to work with the whole of the campaign, really, and it's a family that unites so many different traditions and parts of our movement, and that's because it's got such a force of logic and clear rationality in terms of why it is the right thing to do, and because we're all Democrats and this is about democracy, and because the first past the post system is so clearly weighted in favour of the Conservative Party. So at every level of this debate, the logic, the democracy, the politics, and also the community side of it, the issue around first past the post is it breeds a winner-takes-all culture, which creates certain parts of the country which get far more political attention than others, and as we all know, money and resources follows the politics. So if we want a more balanced economy, if we want a political economy that actually works for all of our communities, you've got to get your voting system right, because if you don't, it will always be skewed to certain parts of the country that have more political power than others. There is a basic democratic argument, which is that every vote should count equally, and the proportion of votes that a political party gets should be directly reflected in the number of seats that they have in a parliament. It is basic logic and common sense. And to have a system that doesn't achieve either of those goals, because we all know that of the 650 seats in the Westminster Parliament, only 100 really ever count because they are the so-called swing seats. So it fails on that argument. And it fails on the very clear argument around having seats that reflect votes. I mean, we all know that the SNP in Scotland got 95% of the seats in Westminster on the basis of 45% of the vote. We all know that since 1945, if you aggregate all of the public votes, the vote share that the Labour Party has received since 1945, it's 40% of the vote. The Tories have had 41% of the vote, but the Tories have been in power for 63% of the time. And those stats should be why it's so clear that it's right for us as a party to make this decision, to cross the Rubicon, and to do the right thing for democracy, and the right thing for our politics, and the right things for our community. I wanted to also just close by busting a few myths. What about this thing around, well, the thing is with first past the post, it delivers stable government. I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary that anybody tries to make that argument anymore. So I don't even need to bust that myth. That myth is well and truly busted years ago. This myth as well about, oh, well, it allows extremists and small parties to come in, and small parties which often have very abhorrent views that we certainly wouldn't want to hear in the best case scenario. We would wish that they didn't exist. But the reality is that they do exist. But the way to deal with it is with a very clear mantra, which is that sunlight is the best disinfectant. If we don't have the confidence to defeat these characters in Parliament, to defeat them in the argument, in the political debate about their xenophobic and disgraceful views, then all you do is create a festering sore, and you give them almost a mystique, as if they become an insurgency. And that is precisely what happened with UKIP. And, you know, I certainly don't want to see members of UKIP in Parliament. But when a party gets 3 or 4 million votes and 1 MP, it creates a grievance, which gives that party far more power than if you had some of the clowns and jokers that would come into Parliament. We take them apart in Parliament. We scrutinise. We're forensic. That's how a democracy should work. So but we need to bust this myth around it being dangerous because of extremism. And I think the other myth is around the way in which first past the post is supposed to keep us as a country more solidly together. And that myth has been absolutely busted as well, because there's no doubt at all that we've seen some terrible division and polarization in recent years. Proportional representation creates a culture of much better decision making, much better working across parties in order to improve the quality of the decisions that you make. And I mean, if you look at some of the absolutely mad stuff that this new Truss administration is coming forward with, on the basis of no mandate whatsoever. There is nothing almost that they're proposing over the last week or so that is in their 2019 manifesto. So if we don't fix this, I am genuinely worried about the future of our democracy. There are deeply worrying opinion polls showing that younger people in our society are increasingly cynical and skeptical about democracy, increasingly saying things like, well, actually, an authoritarian ruler, a strong person who disregards the rules, is more likely to get things done. These are the deep roots of cynicism and disenfranchisement and disillusion that are directly connected and a product of first past the post. So what you're doing as delegates, the work that you've done to actually put us in a place where we may actually win this here on the conference floor is hugely impressive. Tribute to Laura and the team who've done such a fantastic job. And the final myth I would say that needs to be busted is that if we vote for this, and if we go for this as a party, it will somehow send a signal that we can't win on the basis of first past the post. But hang on a second. In order to change to proportional representation, we have to win a first past the post election to get the progressive majority in Parliament to make this happen. So let's finish by busting that final myth. Thank you very, very much for your more power. Get this done. We're nearly there. Let's get it over the line and do the right thing for the party and do the right thing for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and how reassuring to have such a voice of clarity from the Parliamentary Labour Party, and thank you for coming and the time that you've given our campaign. Now, I was hoping to have a brilliant young woman MP speaking next, and I'm still hoping that she may appear, but I think she might have been detained somewhere. However, we're going to have another brilliant young woman instead. So whilst I hopefully wait for Nadia Whittam to arrive, I'm going to ask Tess Milligan. I'm springing this on her, by the way, yeah? She thinks she's got another half hour to have a glass of wine, relax, figure out what other people are talking about. No, it's all rock and roll in this PR campaign. Tess Milligan from Open Labour. Woo! Thank you so much.
Hello, I hope I'm a good substitute for Nadia while we wait for her. I think actually me and Nadia might be the only speakers who are from Generation Z. And it's interesting that Stephen picked up the point about young people feeling increasingly disenfranchised by our democracy. So I'll give you a bit of a look into my generation and our experience of our democracy so far. I don't want to make anyone in this room feel old, but I was 12 years old when the Tories first came to power in this century. I wasn't even born when Tony Blair was first elected Prime Minister. I'm 24. And of course, my first experience with the Tories was that coalition of chaos that began the runaway train of austerity, which is still rolling on down the tracks. And of course, 5 years later, we heard those iconic words that have aged so well from David Cameron, that Britain faces a simple but inescapable choice: strong and stable government with me, or chaos with Ed Miliband. And then a few years later, Theresa May croaked out a similar mantra about strong and stable government, which was exactly, look how that ended up. Absolutely right. And now, fast forward a few more Tory prime ministers, and we arrive at Liz Truss, who has been elected by a majority of people in this country. No, I'm just kidding. She was elected, of course, by less than 200,000 Tory party members, and we see how that is playing out. The mandate that she has to railroad through our economy, through workers' rights, and God knows what else. We'll have to wait and see. So Stephen's absolutely right to pick up on this point about disenfranchisement. I'm from a town called Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire, in the eastern region, and we've had a Tory MP for a number of years now, and it has become a safe Tory seat. No matter how much I vote Labour in my constituency, it is a wasted vote under first past the post. And that is how a lot of young people feel in this country, and a lot of people of all ages feel in this country, in different constituencies where voters are the ones who are expected to game the system, to vote tactically, to somehow put in the research to work out who do I need to vote for to block whichever party we don't like. And I recently moved down to the southwest, and I know there's a lot of people from the southwest, where I'm sure there are a lot of Labour voters, Labour supporters, Labour members in here who probably find themselves sometimes voting Lib Dem in order to block the local Tories. It's certainly what my granddad used to do when he lived in Devon, and he was a Labour Party member for many, many, many years, and he had to hold his nose every election because of first past the post. So in Open Labour, we've been long-standing supporters of PR, and we've tried to extend this within the party as well. We helped introduce STV, which is a form of PR, to the CLP section of the NEC. Cheers. And I'd love to see this across other parts of the party as well. I'd like Labour to lead by example. It's our movement that has always, always been at the forefront of new demands for democracy, for new demands for rights and freedoms for people across our islands, whether that's our rights at work, whether that's radical acts like devolution under the last Labour government. So why not PR? Why do we insist on holding on to an electoral system which benefits our opponents unfairly? We really, really, really need to let go of this. You know, the dinosaurs, I'm sorry, who are still holding on to this outdated system upon which our democracy is creaking and crumbling at the knees. I'll leave it there because I know we're short for time. But thank you very much. And if you're a delegate, make sure you vote for this motion, and good luck to everyone who's in compositing.
Thank you so much, Tess, and for being such a good sport as we seized upon you. Whilst Nadia, who has arrived, catches her breath, I'm going to ask Luke Akehurst to join. Now, Luke is on the NEC. He works with Labour to Win. He and I are very unlikely bedfellows, but, you know, strange things happen at conferences. So without further ado, please, Luke.
You know what? No, you can't. Okay, that's annoying because I'd prefer just to be loudmouth without a mic. But it's great to follow Tess because I used to be the young person talking about this, and Mary Southcott will remember this from 32 years ago when I was a student at the University of Bristol, and I was the Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform Youth and Student Officer, and I used to do crazy things like sitting in my hall of residence, stuffing envelopes full of LCR leaflets to send. Because in those days there was no email. That's how old I am. So it's good to know that there's a generation coming through that doesn't have to do all of that stuff, because they can just hit a button to get this message out. At the time, the debate was a bit rougher. I think our opponents are slightly politer to us now than they were in the 90s, because some of the veterans who are around arguing for electoral reform in the 80s and 90s, you used to get called a lot of bad names inside the Labour Party. Like, we were traitors, we were sellouts, we didn't want a Labour government, we weren't really loyal to the Labour Party. And I'm actually pleased that some of the people that said really horrible things like that at that point have actually been on a real journey, and now kind of quietly come up to me and say, you know, all that stuff that you said at, Noel's conference in Hull in whenever, you were right, actually, and I've come round to supporting a fair voting system. The breadth of the coalition we've got on this is actually really heartening. This is how politics should work, that you should look at issues and where you stand on them and be able to come together with people that you might disagree with on other things and form a broad and comradely coalition. And I actually think it's an incredible source of strength that we've got people from Labour to Win, we've got people like Tess, who's just spoken from Open Labour, we've got people from Momentum, all working together. This isn't about left and right in the party, it's about the right or wrong of what's actually a moral issue about democracy. Because this is an issue about our values as democratic socialists. This is about the justice in our political system and applying the kind of way, as socialists, we want to spread democracy into the field of the economy. In Britain, we haven't even got as far as spreading democracy into the field of democracy with our voting system. So, we want people to be more equal. How can we tolerate an electoral system that treats people unequally, that says people in some parts of the country are absolutely decisive in the outcome of an election, and people in other parts, it's only kind of game theory that they bother going along, or they get trapped into tactical voting? How can that be just, that some people have more say in who forms a government than other people? It's not tolerable, and it's not consistent with our values as democratic socialists. And if we should look at every policy that we look at and apply. Does this advance what we stand for? Does it create a more equal society? And we shouldn't have some artificial barrier where we look at social policy and economic policy and say, do we apply theories of justice to this? And then we look at the electoral system and go, no, we think we'll have a bit of a gamble on this one, because we might sometimes roll a double six, which is I think is a 3% chance. And then we get a massive majority government and we grab all the power to ourselves, and we don't actually care what happens to people's votes in the interim. That's not how you build a constitution or a theory of democracy. A constitution or a theory of democracy needs to look at the position of the weakest person in the society, and do they get an equal say? And that might not always be us. I think we need to keep applying those fundamental arguments, the unanswerable arguments that Stephen talks about, that it just makes no sense for votes to have an unequal value. It makes no sense for there to be no relationship between the share of the vote that a party gets and the share of the seats that it gets. And we need to apply those timeless arguments that don't change depending on the outcome of a particular election or the in the moment narrow political self-interest of our party. This has got to be a policy that we can advocate from a position of strength, not from a position of weakness, that we can stand there and say, we've got the 10% lead. We might well be heading for a Labour majority under first past the post, but actually we care long-term about the health of the democracy of this country. And we're not just going to gamble it on one election. We're going to have a democratic system that stands the test the test of time. And I think I'm going to cut short my remarks, because I always tend to digress a bit. But I wanted to say that you've already won. You've won by getting 140 CLPs to pass this. That is just a stunning achievement. And then to come back and do it in a second year, I'm a student of and a practitioner of getting things to happen at Labour Party conferences. That's incredible, and it was a grassroots achievement. It wasn't like someone turned on a green light in the leader's office and said, please do this. This was like people in CLPs, CLP by CLP, winning the arguments. We've already won by this winning in the priority ballot twice in a row. That is an achievement, particularly now there's only 6 topics on the CLP side, so getting this into the top 6 is a really significant achievement. And I think we're going to win tomorrow. I think this long, long journey of this campaign that I got involved in when I didn't have a walking stick and I only needed one pair of glasses and didn't have to juggle which ones for reading or whatever. And I thought there was an urgency to it then in 1990. By heck, there's an urgency to it now with the state that the country is in and the failure of a government that we've got at the moment. And I think something very historic is going to happen. And we are going to win this at a Labour Party conference. And something that a lot of people doubted could ever happen. But I never doubted it would happen because it is consistent with the values of the Labour Party. So one day the Labour Party was going to wake up and align its values on electoral systems and democracy with its values on the economy and social policy.
That was, as always, absolutely brilliant. And I never thought I'd say it, but I could actually listen to Luke Akers talking for longer. That was just fantastic. It's a shame you're not a delegate, because I would so love everyone to hear that, but hopefully someone has videoed it. Our next speaker is an absolutely fantastic MP. She's hugely in demand because she's fantastic, she's principled, she's committed, and she's very, very busy. She's also a real campaigner, so it's great to have a campaigning MP amongst us, and I'd like to welcome Nadia Whittome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Laura, and thank you to the organisers of this rally, which is largely also you, Laura, and just a huge congratulations to every single one of you who submitted this motion, who argued for it in your CLPs, who won that argument and are now going to do the same thing on conference floor. I firstly just wanted to say, as Luke said, really what a testament it is to this campaign, that it's united people from all tendencies from the Labour Party, of different parts of the left and the right and the centre, because this isn't about where we come from in the party. It's about building a more democratic society, and really we have to start with the electoral system. Also, my notes have gone, so I was trying to buy a bit of time there, but they still gone. Okay, they're back. So, like many of you, I'm here today because I believe and have always believed that there's no socialism without democracy. And as socialists, we believe in a radical redistribution of not just wealth, but power as well, away from the 1% and towards working people. But that's not going to happen for as long as the same party of the rich, consistently backed by a minority of voters, keeps ending up with 100% of the power. We're also socialists because we believe in equality, right? And what is a more basic democratic and egalitarian principle than every vote, no matter who casts it, should be worth the same? Now, I don't think that my constituents in Nottingham East, where we've got some of the worst levels of child poverty and fuel poverty in the country, I don't think that they're any less important because they happen to live in a so-called safe Labour seat. And I don't think that they should have less of a say in the outcome of the country than people just 5 minutes down the road in Gedling who happen to live in a very marginal Labour Tory seat. I don't want young people to hear again, we're not going to talk about the climate crisis because it's not a vote winner in swing seats. I mean, besides the fact that I just don't think that's true either. And I never again want to hear black and brown people be told that our communities, our concerns are an electoral liability because we're not the voters who matter. I've heard, and all of us have been told by people that, oh, you don't want PR for many reasons, but one of them is that it allows extreme, dangerous ideas to get a hearing in Parliament. Have those people seen the UK government? We live in a country where the ruling party is deporting refugees to Rwanda, where the Home Secretary has spouted far-right anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, where we've got an energy secretary in Jacob Rees-Mogg who doesn't believe in climate action. And these people aren't just a small marginal party. They're not kind of just about to pass an electoral threshold. This is the party in power, emboldened by a dysfunctional electoral system, which, as we've already heard from speakers already, disproportionately and unfairly benefits the Tories. I don't know about you, but I've had enough. To quote a classic, it's time to take back control. And I think there's no better place to start than fixing our electoral system and our democracy.
Now, I just would like you all to say hello, because there's 100 people out there somewhere listening to us. Could you say hello to the people who are being zoomed in on Zoom or something? Is this the first past the post campaign? Could we do a bit better, please? Hello? Oh, good. I'd also like to say I'm really sorry that our next speaker isn't with us. A very, very dear friend of the campaign, Shyster Izzy, is unfortunately her mum has been taken very seriously ill. So I would also like us to send some love to the brilliant anti-racism and pro-PR campaigner, Shyster, and I'm sorry that she's not with us this evening. But I am delighted that we've got one of our many trade union supporters. Some of you may have heard him yesterday, Simon Weller, who's the Assistant General Secretary of ASLEF.
All right, hello. Firstly, I'm Simon Weller. I'm the Assistant General Secretary of ASLEF, the Train Drivers Union. I was a train driver for 20 years, and then I became the Assistant General Secretary in about 2009. But firstly, I'm going to start with an apology, and that's from Mick Whelan, the General Secretary of ASLEF, who was due to speak here. But he's also the chair of TULO, the Trade Union Liaison Organisation, and they have their event this evening. So kind of he needed to be chairing the event. So you've got the second 11. So where are we with this? Is there a significant move by the trade union movement? As we know, last year, basically it fell because of the trade union vote. Kind of forget how powerful the trade union vote is from time to time. But there has been a shift. Unison is now supporting it. Unite is supporting. ASLEF is supporting. Well, so there has been a significant shift within the trade union movement. And my own union, ASLEF, only the year before last changed its position on PR. Before we were very hardline first past the post. PR was just a bourgeois indulgence. And I would actually like to pay credit to Julian Vaughan, who's in the room, one of our members, who led the campaign and led the argument at our conference. And we have a kind of very, very tight old citrines type conference. So Julian's in the room. There you are. Put your hand up, Julian. I have to say, it's from a little bit of work you can build this momentum. But what we have to say is this is not a silver bullet. You know, the meeting we had yesterday was quite academic and really, really, really interesting. I had to say that because I was quite rude about the academics. I'm trying to make up for it. But we really need to get the story right. We need to not communicate in that weird trade union language that certainly I'm used to using, or that weird Labour Party CLP language that I'm sure many of us are very familiar with. We need to be able to communicate this to everyone else about how important it is, and not do it in the sort of whiny voice, oh, we're always losing, we want to change the rules, because that's kind of that'll be the argument that will be pushed against us. Actually, what we need to say is every vote has value. Now, whether that's the vote for the ultra-left or for the ultra-right. I have heard, oh, we'll never see another majority Labour government again if we have PR. I have to say, we're not seeing many of them at the moment. I think it's really important because what used to be the coalition that everyone now seems to be afraid of, because what they're saying is, oh, we need not a coalition government. We used to have that coalition within the Labour Party. The Conservatives also had that coalition. There were many different voices, different views within their party, within our party. And then we came out with something that was representative of the greater will, whether that was right or wrong. We're dealing with the Conservatives here, so it was mostly wrong. But it was a coalition. The way things are working now, the changes in society, and just the way things have evolved in the last 10, 15 years, those coalitions within the parties no longer exist. I think we should be a little bit more upfront and say perhaps we should have the coalition in the government. And as to we'll never see another majority Labour government, in New Zealand they have a system that is specifically designed to deliver a coalition government. Yet Jacinda Ardern's Labour Party won a majority. So if we're going to be dealing with myth busting, there's a myth that needs busting straight away. And I did hear Paul Sweeney yesterday, coming from a former Scottish MP and a Scottish MSP's position. And he summed it up brilliantly, I thought, in that we are dealing with alienation, which is why we're seeing people walk away from politics. They feel they have no agency. Or they then walk into the extremes. They walk into the authoritarian man, and it's always a man, will tell you, I can solve all your problems, whilst incidentally and coincidentally and unrelatedly making myself extremely rich. We actually need to have a system that ends that alienation. And we need to have a system where every person's vote has value and they feel that it has value. So with that, thank you.
Now, I'm hoping, Lara, you're somewhere here. Yay. Okay, what was it? Gen ZPY? Gen Z, there you are. I'm showing I'm Jen, haven't got a clue. So Lara Parizzotto, who's a campaigner for migrants' rights, who comes from the campaign Our Home, Our Vote. And we're really delighted that they are supporting the PR campaign. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lara. I'm a councillor in Hounslow. I'm the co-founder of Migrants for Labour and also co-founder of the Our Home, Our Vote campaign. In June, I became a British citizen. And the number one motivation, behind me being prepared to spend the hefty fee of £1,330 was that I was going to be able to gain the right to vote. But as we all know, that vote that I gained doesn't mean that much sometimes, much like my citizenship, which can easily be taken away by the Nationality and Borders Act. And I really need my vote to matter. I'm a migrant in the UK, so I think I'm justified in saying that the hostile environment policies don't really benefit me or the other 9 million migrants in the UK. Migrant voices, thank you. Migrant voices, however, are not just ignored, they're often locked outside of the polling station. We're already a minority, and those of us like me who gain the right to vote just get drowned by first past the post. Worse still is that many of us, close to 1.5 million migrants in the UK, don't even have the right to vote, no democratic say at all because of their nationality. And last year, how did the government respond to this? With the Elections Act, which brought even more first past the post and stripped some of EU citizens' voting rights in the UK. So because of your nationality, you might not have the chance to decide on policies affecting you, ranging from visa fees to even your bin collection. Nonetheless, your taxes are collected, and certainly they don't discriminate. Makes sense why it's so easy for the government to use us as scapegoats for their vile policies. Residence-based voting rights would mean that all residents, no matter where they're from, have the right to vote. And this is already a policy that is in place in Scotland and Wales. We just needed to bring it over here. And that's what the Our Home, Our Vote campaign is advocating for. It's time to give all residents a fair and equal and the right to vote. But once we get it, that vote must count. So I'm really glad that PR is now on the agenda, and I want to see it in the manifesto right alongside residence-based voting rights. Thank you.
Now, no offence meant to our esteemed members of Parliament, but maybe just as well that quite a few of them haven't come along, because otherwise we'd be running even further over time. But I do bring apologies from a whole range of people from the PLP. First, top of the list, I would like us to send a big get well soon to Debbie Abrams, who's a big supporter of PR and has had a bit of an operation recently, and she sends her apologies. So could we send a get well Debbie, please? The brilliant Kat Smith, who isn't, I don't think she's at conference this year. She was in Composite last year, massive supporter of PR. Alex Sobel from Open Labour, ably represented, I think, by Tess today. Tulip Sadiq, Luke Pollard, and Rachel Maskell from York. And they all send their best wishes to you all and their good wishes for the votes tomorrow. But I would like to welcome, with great thanks that he has arrived, the MP from Southampton Test, Alan Whitehead.
Hi, it's great to be here tonight in such a packed event, which I think presages what I hope will be a rather good result from conference this week. And it comes at a time of a little sadness for me, because I have been campaigning one way or another for PR ever since I've been a Member of Parliament, and indeed before it. And I've been a Member of Parliament now for 25 years. I'm not standing at the next election. But what I hope is that the person or the people who follow me will actually be in an entirely different environment in the Southeast than we've been before. Because I also stand before you tonight actually as one of the loneliest MPs for Labour in the country. And that is because there is no Labour MP to the west of me for about 112 miles. There's no Labour MP to the east of me for about 65 miles, and no Labour MP to the north of me for about 45 miles. In the southeast, we had 8 Labour MPs, 74 Conservative MPs. And you might believe from that Conservatives got 80-90% of the vote, 88% of the seat. Well, they didn't. They got just over 50%. We had just over 22%, did better than that, 28% in 2017. And we still got 8 Labour MPs in the southeast. But the important thing is that the engine of the majorities for the rotten Tory governments that we've had year after year after year, is there in the southeast. It is the most flagrantly rigged part of the country as far as elections are concerned. And that's what we can put right with a change to PR, because we need to link the rotten Tory governments we've had for such a long time with precisely that way of doing things as far as votes in the country are concerned. And that's why getting PR as soon as possible is not just the right thing to do. It's not just morally right. It's not just right from the point of view of how elections come out, but it's actually very much now in our self-interest as a party that we make this change. And certainly as far as the southeast of England is concerned, the idea that shortly after the next election, I will no longer be one of the loneliest. Luke Pollard, I think, is actually the loneliest MP in the country. But I will no longer, or my successor will no longer be the loneliest MP, because we will have possibly dozens of Labour MPs in the southeast of England on a fair voting system, ready to put right those injustices which have happened over so many years with Tory governments in the past. That's why it's important morally, legally, and practically as far as the future is concerned. And I really wish every success for the campaign this week in the hall and in the conference. And let's go forward from that to see that my retirement from politics is graced. Sorry, I'm not going to retire from politics. I'm retiring from being an MP. Is graced with those successors who really can properly represent the southeast of England, particularly as far as the future of our country is concerned.
So I think we should just give an extra special bit of love to lonely Alan Whitehead. Oh. Now, there are so many people wanted to speak. Some have graciously decided to step down. I would like to thank Danny Abrams from the FBU, who spoke last year. Danny, where are you? Give us a wave. Yay! Thank you, Danny. Your support is much appreciated, as is the fact that you've made a little bit of room on the timetable. And I would also now really excited to introduce a woman General Secretary, because there ain't yet quite enough of them. But from the Musicians Union, the General Secretary, Naomi Pohl.
Thank you. I feel a little bit ungracious now. I should perhaps have stepped aside, but hey, it's my first Labour conference as General Secretary, so I'm going to take every opportunity that I get to speak. So the Musicians Union, we've got about 32,500 members. We're one of the smaller trade unions in the movement, but we really pack a punch. And we've long supported proportional representation. Our executive committee actually discussed it just a few weeks ago in the run-up to this event, and a couple of our EC members are here to support us. And they reaffirmed their support. We need a fairer system in which every vote counts. And we need a fairer system that will encourage voter turnout and address apathy. And we need a more representative government. Who do this government represent? They have an 80-seat majority, but they've shown with their announcement on Friday that they only represent the top 1% of the country, if that. It's getting to the point where even their own MPs don't support them. And we've had so many people stand down from their posts that it's actually quite hard to keep track of. So first past the post was supposed to keep the extremists out of power, but how's that going for us? Not very well. So the MU supports proportional representation, which we think would be a much fairer electoral system. Thank you.
That was very good for a first-time delegate. So welcome to your first Labour conference. I hope it's the first of very, very many. Our next speaker has been to a couple more Labour conferences. He was an MP in Ipswich. He's a stalwart of our coalition and of the campaign. I'm really delighted to introduce the chair of the Labour campaign for electoral reform, Sandy Martin.
Well, thank you, conference, or at least that part of conference that's here. There are many people in our party who are worried about what the press will do to our party as a result of us voting for electoral reform. But I've got a message for you, which is that the Daily Mail have got their retaliation in first. They're already attacking us for supporting proportional representation. And I've got a prediction for you that at the next general election, the Daily Mail will be also attacking us for our support for the National Health Service and our support for fair wages and our support for a cleaner and more sustainable environment. And if they get the chance, they'll be attacking us for eating bacon sandwiches as well. We join the Labour Party and people get involved in their trade unions because we've got a vision of a better society. And that's why we're fighting for everything that we're fighting for. And we know that the mess that the Tories are making of this country at the moment will not easily be solved in the course of one parliament. I listened to our esteemed General Secretary David Evans this morning, and he said we need to not just win the next general election, but then we need to win again, and then we need to win again. And my message is that we can really only guarantee that that can happen and that we can have that sustainable, progressive government if we change the electoral system. And you know what? The Daily Mail knows this, which is why they're attacking us. That's precisely why the Conservative correspondents and so on are so opposed to us supporting proportional representation, because they want to be able to continue to govern the country with less than half the vote. They haven't had more than half the vote for the Conservative Party since 1935. We need to get a proper electoral system, a proportional electoral system, which gives us the power to do all those other things that we want to do. And are we going to be intimidated by the Daily Mail? No. Are we going to be intimidated by the right-wing media? No. Good. Let's go out and win then.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And for those of you who are not members of the Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform, please, please join. This is a very broad coalition, fantastic organisations in it. I just spotted, by the way, I forgot to mention them before, I'll get my ass kicked. Compass, Neil Lawson is down at the back there. Electoral Reform Society, Make Votes Matter, Open Labour, Politics for the Many, but of course the Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform. And we are hoping that at some point it'll become an affiliated society that will give it a bit of a vote on the NEC. So it is really, really important. If you're not a member, please join them. And I believe they're going to be setting up an LCER, what was it? Generation Youth. Youth, that'll do. Okay, thank you. And in fact, our next speaker qualifies, unlike me, which is why I don't know which generation I'm talking about. We are delighted, really delighted to have so many people from trade unions this year. This is quite a big shift for us. We've made a lot of progress over the last year in the conversations that we've had with trade unionists up and down the country. And they have been organising. I mean, woe betide anyone who thinks that an external campaign can pop into a union and tell them what to think. It just doesn't work that way. And the fact that so many unions have shifted is testament to the power of the shift within the trade union movement. So I'm absolutely delighted that we have got with us Jack Robinson, who is a trade union activist and a Unison member.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm really going to hold on to that youth thing for as long as I can. I really am. Actually, in fun fact, in Unison, not technically a young person anymore. That one really hurt. Okay, so my name is Jack Robinson. I'm a proud trade unionist and unison activist. Although I speak to you in a personal capacity, I'm really proud to be part of a union that has really strong pro-PR policy against first past the post, and we've come such a long way, and we're really proud of that in unison. I also just want to say, a lot of people talk about party unity at conferences, but what I want to say is this campaign is party unity. I have never seen such a broad amount of people from all over different wings, different factions coming together to say things must change. And I think that's just absolutely wonderful, and it's a credit to the campaign staff. It really is. So, friends, it's time to make first past the post history. For the past couple of years, the UK has ended up with governments most people didn't vote for, and they don't even come close to representing our interests. Endless Tory governments claiming power from a few and imposing it onto the many. Now, some say that first past the post brings us strong majority governments. Hold for laughter. But that's just not been the truth here, has it? And I think, frankly, it's nonsense to suggest that people like Jacinda Ardern, Olaf Scholz, or Pedro Sanchez are weak in how they express their power. They're not. They are strong, progressive leaders, and we can have that under PR as well. People also say that PR gives way to special interests and the extremes. But I say that a Tory government that's uncompromisingly right-wing, holding on to 100% of the power with not even nearly a majority of the vote, that is extreme, that is undemocratic, and that is unsustainable. And as has been said before, let them talk about coalition and compromise, because quite frankly, my ambitions for Labour are not determined by what our opponents say. I'm not bothered about what the Daily Mail says in its headlines. This is about our vision for the Britain that we want to build. This isn't just about voting systems or previous electoral performance. It's a vision for a better society, where your ability to affect the outcome of elections isn't determined by your postcode, where the concerns of all voters in all communities are actually heard, rather than random swing groups that apparently hold the keys to power. And lastly, I would say as trade unionists, and Nadia mentioned this earlier, we stand for the redistribution of wealth and of resource, but also of power, of political power, taking it away from people and giving it back to the general public through PR. That is what we stand for. It is in our core. It is in our values. To give everyone a voice, no matter who they are or where they come from. That is our fight. It is a fight we can and must win, and it is a fight that Labour can and must lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So from Unison to the other big union, which has come out against first past the post, and I'm really hoping, because I can't see her, that Nicola Redwood from Unite is somewhere in our midst. Oh yes, brilliant. Nicola.
Good evening, comrades, and how fantastic it is to speak to such a packed room tonight around this. I'm a Unite member, Unite branch secretary, and co-chair of Unite Rank and File. Unite Rank and File is an independent network of rank and file activists within Unite. I've been an active member of Unite and its predecessor unions, Amicus and MSF, for over 20 years. I was a Unite workplace rep in the NHS until being made redundant in October 2020. Yeah, sucks. Somebody who works for the NHS being dismissed in the middle of a pandemic. Would you believe it? I've been a supporter of PR since I was around 16 years old. Bear with me all, I'm old school, definitely not Generation X because I've written stuff down on a piece of paper. I was studying German and French GCSE, and we learnt a lot about politics in Germany and France. This continued into my time at university, studying computation and German in Manchester. I simply could not understand why we had such an unfair system in the UK. and that marginalised smaller political parties, and particularly parties of the left, didn't particularly have much of a voice. I have been campaigning for a change in our electoral system now for over 30 years, which we now have in the devolved countries, and see how much better politics works there. I want to see a fairer, more equal electoral system that gives a voice equally to smaller political parties, something a lot of the speakers have touched on tonight. Had we had some form of PR in 2017, we might now have a Labour government. Just think about that. And at this point, the Tories absolutely dislike the idea of PR intensely, as it would result in them having less power and fewer seats in Westminster. Oh, what a thought that is. Unite and other unions had no position on electoral reform at Labour Party conference last year. That position has now changed as Unite Policy Conference last year supported the motion to reject first past the post. It wasn't by any means an easy job, and certainly not a done deal. Myself and the team from Labour for a New Democracy worked really hard, persuading delegates, talking to them, lobbying them, certainly lobbying them, particularly our Scottish delegates. The motion was carried by about 2/3. There was a bit of a debate on the conference floor as to whether it had passed or not. It was clear from the position I was sitting in. I could see the entire hall. There were more hands up in support than opposing, absolutely more. And that was confirmed by the top table. There are now unprecedented levels of Labour Party member support for PR. Excellent. Electoral reform got through the priorities ballot today, and the debate will now happen on the conference floor this week. We have been busy building up support at Labour Party conference this year, with more unions now on board. I therefore urge you to support the motion, talk to your friends, colleagues, delegates who are here to support the motion as well. And we can carry on our discussion and change our electoral system to one that is fairer and means that many more people will have their voices heard, particularly those who are very disenfranchised by what has happened over the last 40 years or more to date. Thank you all.
Now, as Stephen Kinnock sneaks out, the ant of the PLP, the deck has snuck in. You'll remember last year that the beautiful Kinnock gave way to the elder statesman MacDonald, and I don't know why this happens every year. I think secretly they've got something going on, but it only ever comes out at conference. I am absolutely delighted. For me, he's still the People's Chancellor. I'm really, really delighted that we've got another stalwart supporter of PR, John McDonnell.
Thanks. Can you all disremember that ant and deck reference, for Christ's sake? I'll be extremely brief. Exactly as others have said, I think we're on the edge of a huge potential advance in terms of democracy for our movement this week if we can get this vote mobilised completely. I've been doing various media and all the rest, and I got the usual question came up, particularly about what's happening in some of the European elections, about, well, aren't you worried about an extremist party being elected? And I said to them, didn't you see the budget on Friday? Because what we've seen, and literally, it's not meant to be a joke, because on Friday we saw an extremist government that are further to the right than we've ever seen in this country ever before, elected on a rigged balloting system, electoral system, that introduced a neoliberal policy program that on an ideology that we thought we'd killed off 5 years ago. It was appalling, and it was embedded with not just a tax on ordinary working people and their living standards, but a tax on trade union rights again. And yes, with a hint of yet another attack on the poorest within our society because of the attacks on UC. We have an extremist government at the moment. The first past the post system does not protect against that sort of extremism. So I think we're at a stage now where we're winning the argument overwhelmingly. We've won the argument, I think, amongst our constituencies. We've won the argument amongst the major trade union now. So we're now on the edge of, I think, a significant victory. Now, I saw what Keir Starmer said, that it won't be in the manifesto. Look, when we founded our party, we decided that we'd take up this new sort of Greek invention called democracy. And we founded our party on that basis. And I think we just have to remind, as gently as we can, all that our decisions are taken democratically. No one is above that. I think Keir's been mixing with the royalty too much the last few days. He's not a feudal monarch. He's an elected leader of the party, accountable to the party and accountable to all of us. We have a democratic structure by which we determine those decisions. Well, I hope that we'll be able to reflect that in a constructive dialogue this week, constructive debate, explaining the arguments for the change that we want, convincing the delegates here, but also convincing them in a way that we can go out there and advocate this policy clearly in the run-up to the general election. Because actually, I do think it's an election-winning policy. To actually say to people, your vote will count again. If we win this week, and then there are further statements about this won't be in the manifesto, we know we have a democratic process within the construction of a manifesto as well still, which is the Clause 5 meeting, where we come together as a party in terms of our trade unions, in terms of the shadow cabinet and others, and party representatives too. And that will be, again, a democratic exercise to ensure that the wording goes into the manifesto that we want. So whatever happens this week, let's win this vote. Whatever the response is from some elements in the Labour leadership, don't in any way despair at that, because there will be then time then in which we can work to convince them, but in addition to that, convince all those others that will be round that table at the Clause 5 meeting. And in that way, I think we will have that tremendous breakthrough that people have been working for throughout. And I just say time and time again, if anyone has any reservations about this, just go back to this run of recent elections and the scale of that Tory majority that was constructed on what is effectively, I think, a defective electoral system that has enabled them actually to reap havoc on our society itself, but also to have the confidence of becoming possibly the most corrupt government that we've ever seen in living history. So after this week, I think next year's Labour Party conference, I think hopefully by then we'll have convinced all, we will have it as party policy, and we'll be breaking up into working groups to discuss the detail of the policy that we're going to implement when we go into government. Solidarity.
Thank you so much to John. Like all of the MPs who join us, they really are running around. It's an absolutely punishing schedule. So we're very grateful that he's made the time. Now, I'm really hoping that Ed Baldwin from the CWU is here. These are the posties. We've been supporting them on strike. They've been doing an absolutely extraordinary job. And we are very grateful that despite the punishing schedule of industrial action they've had to be organising, we've got a speaker from the CWU here with us this evening.
Jeez, I'm sharing a stage with John McDonnell. How surreal is that, guys? Look, apologise. I know you guys wanted Dave Ward. You've got Ed Baldwin from CW. So look, I'll do my best to actually fill in for him. At the last Labour conference, I witnessed Welsh Labour lead a powerful debate on PR, highlighting the excellent work that what they did leading their country during the pandemic, achieving power through the PR system and working with other parties. Sadly, that motion was defeated, and the trade unions was a contributing factor by not actually voting for it. But evidence does show that under PR, courtesy of a fact check by Channel 4, that the Conservatives' majority would have been reduced not in one, but in 5 PR systems. More people vote for other parties than they do for the Tories. PR would give them a voice in Parliament. Is that not true democracy? No need. No need for tactical voting. Parties would have to appeal to their core support than swing voters in marginal seats. Yes, UKIP accumulated 3.8 million votes, and that would give them an approximately 80 seats in Parliament. But the one-trick populist pony party soon dissolved when their only policy was hijacked. Now, would PR give a voice to fascism? Well, if you haven't woken up now, this country is run by the biggest bunch of racist demagogues sitting in Parliament since Mosley's and his black shirts got their arse kicked on Sunday, the 4th of October, 1936 on Cable Street. Thank you, Grandad. First past the post didn't stop the rise of fascism. While the rest of the nation stayed at home and held their man cheap, it was the trade unions, immigrants from Ireland, Jewish communities, working people united together. That stopped fascism. Comrades, there are 6.5 million trade unions in this green and pleasant land of ours. And for those who talk about forming a new party, under PR, that would give you an approximately 135 seats in Parliament, not the 35 that we've currently got in the Socialist Campaign Group. PR would certainly wake up Labour should that 6.5 million trade unionists look elsewhere for a new home. Now, let's be clear, I'm not looking for a new party. The Labour Party is my party, it's your party. It was started by working class people, and it was the trade unionists. We continue to modernise, but we will always continue to represent working people. So those in the party who seek to maintain the status quo, you modernise. Get out of the way. We, the real democratic socialists, will kick the Tories out before they kill the working class. Solidarity, comrades. Thank you very much.
And so now, in a continuing illustration of the broad church that we are, I think we've got from Labour to win, Jane Thomas. Are you there somewhere? Yes, brilliant. Oh, no. Oh, God, I'm really sorry. Technical blip. Scrap that, BBC. This is a seamless production. We've actually, you're just going to be gazumped for 2 minutes because Beth Oh, we're having a little argument down there? Beth Winter? Oh, okay. We've got Beth Winter, MP, who's kind of running between events. So I'm really sorry, Jane, but we're going to just hear from Beth. By the way, we had greetings from Mark Drakeford, who some of you will have heard yesterday evening. Did an absolutely fantastic intervention at our meeting. But we are really, really delighted to have Beth.
Oh, diolch yn fawr. And it is literally a fleeting visit, apologies, but I felt it was so important to come along today to express my support, wholehearted support for this motion as it currently stands, because we do need drastic and radical change to our voting system and to our constitution, quite frankly. the first past the post system really does disadvantage countries like my own Wales, Northern Ireland, indeed all of the countries of the United Kingdom. In Wales, you know, the Tories have got very little support, and yet Westminster Parliament just does not represent us. And you mentioned Mark Drakeford, and I just want to quote Mark from the Aneurin Bevan lecture that he gave up in Westminster when he said, "How anyone clings to the notion that a system which delivers so consistently majority Conservative governments on a minority of the votes cast, that is the best for the working people, simply baffles me." And I'm really proud to say that in Wales we are doing things differently. We've already got a form of PR. Maybe not the best, but we have got one in Wales. Mark is a very strong advocate of PR and opposes the first past the post system. We've currently got a constitutional commission looking to improve the democratic rights and involvement of people throughout Wales. And we've got a cooperation agreement in Wales with Plaid Cymru. Some radical policies. We work in collaboration with other people. Very, very different to the adversarial approach of Westminster government. We know how to do politics in Wales, and I know everybody in this room shares that desire to do politics better. So, solidarity, you have our full support from Wales. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you so much to Beth for making the time. Jane, I do apologise, but now we really do have Jane Thomas from Labour to win.
All right, it's like, come on down, isn't it? I just thought the last speaker was fantastic. You know, doing politics better is what we should all aspire to do. So, absolutely. I'm a former politics lecturer where I unashamedly nicked most of Charter 88's notes. I was an early signatory to Charter 88. Any of you, I can see some people's eyes are glazing over already. Those of you that are old enough, they had the ambitions and the aspirations that we still haven't lived up to, but we should aspire to every day. I set up Campaign for Yorkshire, Campaign for the English Regions. I did a piece of work for the Electoral Reform Society. I was, to my shame, the regional organiser for the AV referendum, and then I've also done some work with Unlocked Democracy. So I have constitutional form, but what I do want is constitutional reform. And, oh, thank you. It was my best line, I'm afraid, so it doesn't get any better than that. I do think that one of the things that we now have to be is very bold and ambitious. Not just talk about PR, but I'm going to put it out there. I want to absolutely make sure that we have proper devolution. I'm going to throw in a Bill of Rights. I'm going to throw in a written constitution. I'm going to throw in PR. I'm going to throw in a proper reformed local government that feels and looks like a local government and that is respected by the centre. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about parliamentary procedure. I could bore the pants off you about Henry VIII's powers and statutory instruments. I won't. But the abuses by this government of actually what they're doing in Parliament is absolutely shameful. And I suspect most other democracies wonder how in the hell they're getting away with it. So, tactically, don't get hung up now on what form of PR. Let's talk principles, because that's what this is about. We got too hung up on the AV referendum. We are a progressive, modern party that is outward facing. And we have got to look like one. And that means that we've got to embrace everything that a modern constitution requires. So let's walk the walk and talk the talk, and let's get this thing done. Thank you.
So before we have our final speaker, Paul Sweeney, who some of you will have heard yesterday, but you know, he's worth hearing twice. I would just like to ask, one of our brilliant campaigners and volunteers. There's so many people behind this campaign who are lugging boxes around, dishing out leaflets, going to CLPs, doing talks. The machinery behind a campaign like this is quite incredible. I mean, any of you who've tried to submit a motion to the Labour Party will know how difficult it is. Imagine how difficult it is trying to track them all. And there's an army of people doing all this work, from doing the lanyards, the graphics, the leaflets, the press. It's a massive, massive effort, and it's underpinned at the core of it by people who are going out and making the arguments. So Abby is going to pretend to be this bloke from Manchester called Andy for a couple of seconds. She actually nobbled him at a recent event. Andy Burnham has been a brilliant advocate for PR, and in his absence, I would like to say thank you, even though he's from the wrong side of the Pennines. Abby is also from Manchester, so she's going to be a little bit Abby, and she's going to be a little bit Andy.
Thank you very much. We've got a statement from Andy here. I wish I could pretend that he sent it to me directly, but no, that's come from elsewhere. And from Andy, he says, under our antiquated political system, the Conservative Party has been in power for more than 2/3 of the last century without ever winning a majority share of the popular vote. When combined with the parliamentary whip system, first past the post ends up handing inordinate power over our lives to a tiny elite who often don't reflect the rest of the country. Let's not let the next 100 years be like the last. It is time for a wide-ranging programme of political reform. This way, we can ensure the economic and social policies with a majority public support will shape our lives rather than those designed to further the vested interests of the few. And now for something much less eloquent from me. Not much scripted in the way, but just to say that I have been so excited to be involved in all of this. Like we say, all the people sort of behind the scenes, logging the boxes and things. It's been so fun to go around visiting all the different CLPs in lockdown and virtually, of course, and change a lot of minds, talking with folks that aren't just maths teachers. At first it was just maths teachers that seemed interested, but now I feel like we've gotten the story out and people are really excited. And I am pumped. I am a dance around the kitchen excited for the day when no matter your postcode, we and the next generation can live in a political sort of system where there are no more wasted votes and no more tactical votes, where you can, regardless of where you live, vote for what you truly believe in and know that it mattered. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope he's listening, because I'd just like to say, watch out, Andy. It's great to have future mayors joining us. This is the campaign that does succession planning. So we've just been delighted that we've had Beth joining us from Wales, and now we're going to finish with a fantastic advocate for the campaign. He spoke yesterday at our meeting. He could speak for hours. Unfortunately, we probably can't let him because we do actually have to go home in the end. But before we do, and before we invite you to another glass of wine, I'd like to give a big warm welcome to our final speaker. He was a Member of Parliament, and I would love to have him back in Westminster, but lucky the Scots who've still got him representing Glasgow in the Scottish Parliament. It's Pohl Sweeney.
Well, it's just been uplifting today, despite all the down-talking, despite all the energy vampires that try and suck the life out of good ideas. We've succeeded in getting this on the priority ballot, so we're well on the way to getting this reform through. And my God, it is needed, isn't it? Just needed. And thanks so much to Laura, to Sandy, to Samuel, everybody who's went out there and made those cases in sceptical CLPs, who's went and tried and convinced delegates and has won this overwhelming popular mandate across our great Labour Party for a much needed democratic reform. And let's have confidence and pride in what it stands for. It stands for human dignity, and it stands for giving democratic agency back to every one of our citizens. And that's why the Tories and their acolytes in the press are so damned afraid of it, because what we saw play out this week was nothing short of a coup. A plutocracy has taken over our country and ramming forward the most regressive changes to our economic system that we have ever seen. It is absolutely outrageous, and the real kicker is they have no damn democratic mandate to do so. Shame on them. It's down to us. It's down to us and our great Democratic Party to change this for the British people, to save our democracy and to hold our country together. Because I don't know who it is who keeps claiming that somehow first past the post is some paragon of stability, that it introduces some great bedrock of support and democratic mandate in this country. Well, I'm afraid, where have you been for the last 10 years? Our country's cracking apart at the seams, not just constitutionally. My goodness, in 2014, we nearly saw the breakup of our country. We saw Brexit happen. And not just any old Brexit. We had the hard Brexit that was rammed through against the wishes of the majority of the British people because of the insane contradictions in our democratic system. And also we had Theresa May's bizarre claims of a strong and stable government that I'm afraid ended up shriveling up like a crisp packet on a cooker. You know, it was absolutely outrageous to see what happened in that parliament between 2017 and 2019. Unfortunately, I had a front row seat to the whole grotesque spectacle where we had people trying to get through these different permutations of Brexit, all of them defeated, and then we had the appalling demagoguery of Boris Johnson forcing through something that's been so egregiously damaging to all of us. Damn them for what they've done to our country, the vandalism. That's why it falls to us as members of this great party to give the British people sight of a British state that can be reformed for the better, that can give them some degree of sense of agency over their lives, that they can vote for the first time ever for a government that actually represents what the majority of the British people cast their votes for. That's what it's fundamentally about. And that might start to solve some of the great anger out there, the great alienation out there, and start to repair the horrendous damage that's been allowed to happen. And certainly coming from Scotland, I'm speaking, I think, on behalf of Scottish colleagues here, we need this to happen for the sake of our United Kingdom. Because there's only so much more we can take, I'm afraid. And I think I speak for a lot of other parts of the UK when I say that. And when we have nationalist forces saying, this doesn't work, the British state can't be reformed, the only option is to quit and get out. We have to have something to say in response to that. And it can't just be, oh, it's too scary. It has to be, come with us and build a better Britain. Together, we can do this for all the working people of this country, and we can build a true democracy. That's what this is about. At the end of the day, it's about saving our country. And that's why it's in our great Democratic Party's tradition. We've tried to do this for over 100 years, since the dawn of universal suffrage, since the first majority or plural Labour governments in the 1920s and 1930s. We tried to do it. We're on the cusp of doing it. It's been confounded by accidents of history. This should have been sorted a century ago. It's a curiosity that first past the post has endured as long as it has. That's why it's in our tradition to go out there and get this reform sorted. It should have been done by our forefathers and foremothers. Now it falls to us, not just to do it for the sake of our democracy and the integrity and cohesion of our society, but to hold our very United Kingdom together. That's why this week is so pivotal. I can't stress it enough. We thought we'd get it through last year. We've made great progress. We've got so much more to say this year about how much more we've built from the trade union movement, from our brothers and sisters across the movement. We're ready to do it. Let's go out there and win this thing this week. Thank you.